Hello, everyone. Welcome to Measuring the Score podcast, the podcast where we offer our opinions on film scores and the films they're inspired by. I'm Chris.
And I'm Leslie.
Let's get started. Hey everyone, welcome to episode 8. Today we're going to be talking about Hard Rain. I'm kind of excited about this one. But before we begin, is there anything else you've been listening to besides the score here?
Yes, I was listening to Miss Peregrine's Home for Peculiar Children. It's a score that Mike Hyam and Matthew...
It was Matthew Martin, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
I can't read my handwriting. I apologize.
That was the Tim Burton movie.
Yes, it was Tim Burton movie. And I read the first book of the series. And so I was excited when they announced that the movie was coming out. And I'm like, oh, yes, this is great. And then I watched the movie. And then I was kind of disappointed because they changed what I thought was some important elements of the book up in the movie. But the other day I was driving around, as I normally do. And when I drive, I think. And I was thinking, I'm like, I wonder how that score sounds, because it didn't stand out to me when I watched a movie. It wasn't memorable right then and there. So I decided to listen to the score, and yeah, I was not very impressed by it.
I remember there was only like one thing that stood out to me with the score. There was the scene on the pier, and they had like techno music playing. And when I say techno music, I don't mean like, it was the score with like some synthesized. No. This was full on, type techno music. And I remember it was so out of place and did not even fit the scene that it was made for.
Yeah, that piece was bizarre, but the whole score, in my opinion, was very lackadaisical. Just
very bland.
It's just lacking, missing something maybe. So I didn't finish it. I got bored.
Yeah.
And I turned my attention to
It was
something
one of the
else.
few times that it was a Tim Burton film that Danny Elfman did not score, because I remember when that came out, and it was the Danny Elfman was kind of busy. He had a choice between that film there or the Alice in Wonderland sequel, and he chose to do Alice in Wonderland, which, I mean, both scores.
It's Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and the theme that he created for Alice in Wonderland was fantastic. So yeah, no wonder he came back to do the sequel.
I love Danny Elfman's music, and I wish that he would have had an opportunity to work on both, if that's the case.
Yeah.
Because I felt like he would have elevated it to a next level, and maybe it would have made the movie stick out a little bit more in my mind.
I think it was a combination of he was too busy, and it was the release dates were right at the same time, so he couldn't do both at the same time.
That's sad.
Yeah.
So what have you been listening to?
I was listening to Raya and the Last Dragon. I can't talk, by James Newton Howard.
Well, you can't talk, and I can't read my writing.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
we make a great pair.
No, I was listening to the score to Raya and the Last Dragon by James Newton Howard. It was fantastic.
I listened to the first few pieces of that score, and I liked it. I liked it a lot.
See, what I was expecting, because James Newton Howard, I mean, he's worked with Hans Zimmer. They did Batman Begins, Dark Knight. I really like his work. I really like James Newton Howard. He's always, every score he approaches, he always does something different and unique and original. And with this one, when it started off with a very Asian influence or Chinese influence. I mean, it has that,
Asiatic elements.
Yeah, thank you. And it started off very orchestral and everything else. All of a sudden you hear like synthesized, bass coming in there and synth loops coming in, and I'm going, wait, what? This doesn't sound like a Disney movie.
Yeah, see, I heard the Asiatic part.
Oh,
I love Asian
fantastic
music. But, then again, I do Asian watercolor. I do Chinese watercolor, or sumi-e, which is Japanese. And so when I do that particular watercolor, when I'm painting, I listen to Asian music,
Right.
traditional Asian music, to get me in the mood to paint like that. So when I was listening to the score, that's what I picked up on. I'm like, oh yes, this is nice. This is real nice.
I loved I loved the movements. I loved how he had the female choir coming in there, and I mean it was every single track was something different. It was something unique, and there was a lot of comedic elements in there. I mean, of course, it is an animated film, but it was just fun to listen to. I mean, it was one of those. As soon as I heard it, I couldn't stop listening to it.
I'll have to finish it then.
I still haven't finished it, and the tracks are very long too. Of course, I'm very excited to see the film, especially more so now after listening to the score.
I watched the trailer and I'm like, oh, this looks great. But you know, I was raised. My dad loved Bruce Lee, and he loved all of those Asian fight movies, and so I watched a lot of that as a kid growing up. So
Right.
when I watched the trailer to this movie, I'm like, oh yeah, that looks like it's going to be a good movie.
Disney animated kung fu.
I know, that's great.
Fantastic. Well, today we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna be talking about Hard Rain by Christopher Young. Now, I picked this one, and the reason why I'm so excited to talk about this one because this was my first soundtrack score CD I ever bought. It was the first one. I had always bought a lot of soundtracks, and they would include the scores on there, but this was the first one. I remember it too because me and my brother went to a wrestling match in Montgomery. And I told my mom she was going to the store before we left, and she says, "Is there anything you want me to get?" I said, "Yes, I want to get Hard Rain." She's like, "What?" I was like, "Hard Rain." I listened to it because back in the day, they had it where you could take the CD and put it into like the barcode scanner at Walmart, and you could hear a couple of tracks.
Oh yeah, I remember that. And they
Yeah.
had the headphones.
Right. And
Yeah.
so I was just browsing the soundtracks, and I saw that, and I put it in there, and I heard the main title track, and I was like, oh, I really like this. I want this CD. So I told her I wanted it. And I almost forgot that I asked her to get that for me. And then when I came home, it was she's like, "Oh yeah, I got that CD you wanted." It was like, "Oh." I listened to it so much that I ended up wearing the CD out. I didn't even think that was possible.
I did that to the Mummy. I bought when the Mummy came out, I bought the Mummy soundtrack, and I did the same thing. I listened to it so much, and it was one of my favorite scores at the time. And I remember I was babysitting for these two little girls, and I was trying to entertain them, so I put my CD in the player, and they got scared. They told me it was scary music. And that they were frightened, so I had to turn the CD off.
Well, and one of the things was I'd never heard of this composer before. I did not know who Christopher Young was. Of course, that was very early in my score listening days, so I didn't know who a lot of them were. I didn't even know John Williams did Jaws, Star Wars, and when I started piecing all this together, I'm like, oh wow, so this guy did this. And this is before IMDb, so I was having to find this out on my own. So when I heard Christopher Young's work, and then there was like a CD insert inside the soundtrack, and where he was talking about, the score and what he did, how this was one of his really big action scores, and he wasn't really known for that. He was mainly known for a lot of thriller,
horror, right?
Yeah, it was a lot of horror films. One of his more famous ones is Hellraiser.
Oh, I didn't know he did that.
He did the first two Hellraiser
Yeah,
films.
see, I did not know that.
Oh yeah, and those we might have to listen to one day for the podcast.
Oh, I haven't seen that movie in forever.
Yeah, it's been a long time for me. And the last time, the other day, I listened to those score, like a couple of tracks, and it's a wonderful score. It really is. And Hard Rain was one of these for me growing up that just stuck with me and just kept sticking with me. Then
you have this infinity for action music, and you love making action scores. I know you.
Yeah, it's fun.
After all these years. And so when I started listening to this one, I'm like, I can see why Chris likes this.
I really like action scores, but I'm not very good at making them.
Oh no, you're fine. I think you do a good job.
Well, as far like an action movie though, I mean action oriented scores, yeah, I can do that. But for like an action movie, I've never really had the chance. And I always picture if I ever made a score for an action film, it would be something like Hard Rain, because that would be that every time I think of an action score, this is the first thing that pops in my head because, I mean, this is the first soundtrack I've ever bought. So it was kind of hard for me to.
Aha, you had a hard one now.
I
Like Back to the Future.
hard one, hard rain.
I
Yeah.
know, pun intended.
But no, it was kind of hard for me because I have such a love for this score to go and listen to it and kind of judge it, so to say. I mean, because I guess it's like the rose tinted glasses. It really was hard to listen to it and pick it apart and see what I think about it.
Yeah, that's what happened with me with Back to the Future on our episode 2. I had that same issue because I like the movie so much, and now we're listening to it, or we're watching it from a different perspective. Rather, that we're listening to the music,
Right.
and watching the movie. I was afraid that it was going to ruin my experience with Back to the Future,
Right.
and how much I loved it.
Now, Hard Rain is a 1998 action thriller disaster film produced by Mark Gordon, written by Graham Yost. Now, interesting note about Graham Yost, he started off writing for Hey Dude, the Nickelodeon show.
Oh yes, I remember Hey Dude.
And he's more famous known for writing Speed, which Mark Gordon also produced. And it was directed by Michael Solomon, stars Christian Slater, Morgan Freeman, Randy Quaid, Minnie Driver, and Ed Asner. Also, Betty White.
Betty White,
Yeah,
I
you
love
can't
her.
forget that one. No, the plot is about a heist and man-made treachery amidst a natural disaster in a small Indian town. I am reading this off of Wikipedia. And now, the natural disaster part, it's a flood happening in a town, and there's
They're evacuating.
yeah,
the
they're
town.
all evacuating, and they're
They're afraid the dam was going to break.
Yeah, that's what it was. And the two bank drivers, which is Christian Slater and Ed Asner, they're cleaning up banks up and down the river, and they've got $3 million in the truck, and Morgan Freeman's character is the thief along with his crew, and they try to take the money. Christian Slater takes the money, hides it, and chase ensues and everything else. Right from the start, when you listen to this score, I mean, it was like, as soon as it hits with the main title, it hits. And that was one thing I really, really liked about the score. I mean, because it was huge right off the top. And this theme comes in and slowly builds just for the opening main title theme. I thought it was wonderful.
Yeah, that stuck out with me too. So, we were talking about the release date in 98. The exact release date from what I pulled was January 16th, 1998. So this movie, as Chris was saying, it's a heist movie. You've got this natural disaster element to it. And it was on the coattails of some of the popular natural disaster movies that happened in the early 90s, like Twister.
Volcano, Dante's Peak.
So, this was followed, it fell in line with the disaster movies of the time. What was the original working title?
The Flood.
The Flood.
Well, see, and it, by calling it The Flood and Hard Rain, the whole natural disaster thing does not really work for the film.
It doesn't.
Or the score,
No,
really.
I don't think so either. And, everything that I have read about the working title, they didn't want the focus on the fact that there was a natural disaster going on. They wanted the focus on the heist. And I'm like, well, that makes no sense. If they didn't want the focus on the natural disaster, then why is a natural disaster happening in the movie?
I mean, that's what they should have done. They should have focused more on the natural disaster,
the heist.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know. There was a mess of problems with this movie.
So Christian Slater was the co-producer of the movie, and then John Woo was also attached to the movie at one time, and he left.
Well, that's because Christian Slater worked with Graham Yost on Broken Arrow, and John Woo directed that. So yeah, I could see that happening.
But he left to do Face Off.
Now, if John Woo had directed it, I'm pretty sure Hans Zimmer would have done the score.
More than likely.
And
I don't.
Hans Zimmer at that time was more into synthesized works, because I remember Broken Arrow. It had a guitar score to it. I'm not sure if it was a live guitar or not, but the majority of the score was all digital. So
I don't remember the score from Broken. It's been a long time since I've seen Broken Arrow.
yeah, I mean, it has for me too. So yeah, I can't really see that working. Now the film was taking place in Huntingburg, Indiana, and it was actually shot a lot of it there. I remember the making of for this on HBO popping up.
Yes, and I read about that, and I'm like, this making of. It said making of, and it was on HBO, and I'm like, why can't I find any more information? So I'm glad that you remember that.
Well, HBO back in the day, they did it for Twister, and I remember I had the making of taped on. It was, yeah,
VHS.
yes. I'm showing my age right there.
At least it wasn't on beta tape.
Oh Lord, no, I never had to deal with beta, but no, I actually taped the making of Twister back in the day, and I would watch it over and over because I was really
You
big.
love that movie.
No, I was really big into natural disaster films. I still am. I still love those type of movies. Although the natural disaster movies now are not as, to me, not as good as they were back then.
I'm a geologist, so I pick apart natural disaster movies.
I know you do. But no, and so Twister, I watched the making of. So when I saw the making of Hard Rain, I thought it was fantastic that the entire town, they built it all on a set. The majority of the film where it's underwater, and they built it with tanks and everything else. So when they're running around in water and everything else, this is not like, they're running around in one little portion. No, they built an entire town, and they built it where they could flood it and lower the water and raise it however they needed to. I thought that was fantastic.
Well, also, I read that at the time of the filming, the movie had the largest painted scenic backdrop ever used for a film.
That really is amazing because there were a lot of parts, a lot of times now you could kind of tell it was a painting in the background, but it still looked great.
At first glance, you can't tell unless you sit there and you scrutinize it.
Which we were.
Yeah, granted, because we were scrutinizing everything about the film, but at the time that the movie came out, I'm pretty certain you wouldn't be able to tell very well.
No.
I'm pretty sure that it was well done. I've never seen this movie before now, so I can't tell you. I was living in Germany in 98, so I didn't watch many movies.
Well, see, I didn't know much about the movie because apparently it was delayed a lot before it was finally released. And see, I listened to the score first before I even saw a trailer for this film, and I had such a big hype for this movie just by listening to the score, and see that ought to tell you something right then and there about this score. And now the temp track with his music was from James Horner's Aliens. Now, if you don't know what a temp track is, it's basically where a producer, director will go in and lay music out from another film and piece it in there to where the editor can edit the film around this. It is very particularly troublesome for composers because the producers, directors, and the studio heads too, will get used to listening to that score. So that is what they have in their head. So when the composer comes along, it's like, all right, he wants to do his own thing. He wants to fit the film. He wants to fit the storyline. And then he can't because the director and producers are used to that temp score.
Yeah.
I hate temp scores.
That's why you like to listen to the movie or watch the movie without the temp score.
Every time.
You mute it.
I cannot stand temp music. I am not going to tell you how many times I've come along and it was like, oh no, I want something like the temp music. I'm not that composer.
I'm not that composer. Hire him.
I'm not Hans Zimmer.
Hire Hans Zimmer if you want.
Seriously.
To sound like Hans Zimmer.
It is one of the most frustrating things. So according to IMDb, it was the temp music was the score from Aliens, which composer Christopher Young was a little infuriated having to copy part of the score, and you can kind of hear it a couple of times because especially like the Bishop's Countdown from Aliens kind of had the influence on the score. Now, I don't know how true this is because like I said, this is on IMDb and anybody can post it in there. Now, while the musical score was being recorded in London, several sequences were re-edited and the music had to be rescored to fit those new scenes. Christopher Young had to instruct his orchestrators and conductor, Pete Anthony, through a video conference to do so.
Now, that was state of the art back in 98.
Right. Now,
they didn't have Zoom.
Right. Now, that's kind of a common thing, especially like the score to Tenet. That That was entirely due to COVID-19. That was entirely, through like Zoom and everything else. So back in 1998, that was
state of the art.
Right. Very state of the art.
I remember when they came out with the programs, because I was a flautist in high school, and I was working, I think, on a competition, and we got this new computer software, and we were so excited about it because the notes that we played, the computer actually recorded it and then printed out the sheet music.
What was the name of that?
I can't remember the name of it, but we were
Sibylus?
excited. It was like state of the art, and I could play anything I wanted to in the microphone, and then the computer would spit out the music.
Was it Sibylus?
I can't remember. That was a long time ago.
Now, the producers originally wanted to hire Oscar winner Jerry Goldsmith to write the score, but they couldn't afford his salary. So Christopher Young lobbied hard to get the job, which he ultimately did. You can hear the Jerry Goldsmith influence in the score right from the start.
You can. It's apparent, but it's not bad.
No.
He took his own spin on it. You could tell that it's uniquely his. Which is wonderful because, as an artist, we don't like being boxed up in a box where, they restrict our artistic nature. Oh, no, we want it to sound like this.
Right. And even though he has the influence of Jerry Goldsmith and, James Horner in there, Christopher Young still had his own style. I mean, the entire score. Tell. And it's very apparent when the harmonica comes in. Even now, going back and listening to the score, judging it, even after becoming a composer myself, because it's been years since I've heard the scores since before now. So when the harmonica came in, it was almost a little distracting at first, but then once it keeps going, it really works for the score. Just listening to it. Now the harmonica was John. I'm sorry, I'm probably going to butcher this name, so please forgive me. John Baptiste Frederick Isidore Baron Thielmans. Otherwise known as Toots. Now, I had never heard of this person before. I had no idea who he was. He was a Belgian jazz musician and became the preeminent jazz harmonica player.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, when we start listening to the score, the first track of the score is the theme. And so you've got this, action backdrop kind of set, and then you had the theme come in to play, and then over the theme, you had this harmonica motif come in, and the harmonica motif it's got a bluesy feel to it, kind of like a I would say jazzy bluesy feel, and it worked. It was amazing, in my opinion, how they kind of interwoven that into this melody that he already created, and then he added that other element with the harmonica. And, the movie was supposed to be in the mountains, somewhere. And it was kind of reminiscent also where the movie was filmed, or the backdrop for the movie. It's in this town that's, in the hills.
Right.
And it was kind of reflective in my mind of that. But it was nice. I liked it.
A lot of people say that the harmonica was supposed to represent the whole Midwestern town and everything else.
And that's what I felt. I felt like that.
Well, in the CD soundtrack insert, it said that Christopher Young said that the harmonica was to represent Jim, which is Morgan Freeman, and his crew. And if you notice when you watch the film, every time Morgan Freeman would pop up, you would hear the harmonica 90% of the time, and it worked every time.
Well, art is subjective, so it's whatever the viewer or hearer thinks about.
I'm not saying anything bad about that. Like I was talking about earlier, right from the start, when the score starts up, it's big, it's bold, and it's letting you know that it's there. And it never really stops. Once it starts, the score never really slows down.
And you can tell from the beginning of the score that it's a heist movie. And it doesn't let up to the end of the score. So You've got this action-packed score of nothing but heist music, kind of one-dimensional in a sense, which we can get to when we start discussing the movie itself. But it's not bad, and it's solid. It's a solid score, and I liked it.
Going back and even listening to it from a judgmental point of view, I still enjoyed it. there were still a lot of moments with this score. I was getting into it. He always used a lot of shakers and hi-hats. 90% of the score, whenever the action starts, you're going to hear those shakers comes in.
That's right. You hear a lot of drums or rhythm. You hear a lot of rhythm in there. You also hear some brass, come in there. And it's a nice balance, even though it's, action adventure. The tempo stays constant
Right.
Throughout most of the score. And what I really liked was in the jet ski chase part 2 is what it's labeled in the score, where he brought back that motif at the beginning, but it was different. It was in a higher octave and a different key. It almost is what it sounded like.
Right.
And so it was rewrote for that scene in the movie. But then he also brought back the harmonica, and then the harmonica was also changed just a little bit. So I kind of liked that element there, where he kind of hid that theme throughout the score in different ways.
Right. And that was the one thing I noticed when he brought the theme in at the very beginning. He always managed to bring it back throughout the score and not overdo it. When it would come back at the right time, at the right moment, and it would be changed up just a little bit every time. And I thought, and I'm not saying this because I'm such a fan of this score. I'm saying it just as a listener. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was a great, well orchestrated score.
I agree. And, I was kind of hesitant when you put Hard Rain on the list because, I like heist movies.
Well, for one, you had never seen the film.
But I have never seen the film. So, and it was an older film now, unfortunately. It's an older film. 98 was like yesterday. But anyway. But I liked it. I liked the intensity of it. I liked, like I said, I loved the harmonica. I'm a sucker for harmonica music, but then again, I like Blues Traveler.
Right, and the harmonica is not really used a lot in scores nowadays.
Most scores, I thought, in my opinion, it sounds almost synthetic.
Yeah.
You rarely come across one that actually sounds like an orchestra's playing anymore.
Well,
that kind of makes me sad.
Well, I mean, like with me, I would not even know how to begin to orchestrate something with a real orchestra. Now, I have had live instruments in my score before, but never like a full orchestra. Nothing like what Christopher Young done. In which a lot of his scores now, he's using a lot of digital stuff nowadays, which it still sounds great because I listened to a score to The Empty Man. It was.
Is that a horror movie?
Yes.
Yeah, see. A lot of horror movies.
Well, the last, one of the last action thriller scores that he did that I can think of. I'm sure there's one before them, but the one that really stands out is Untraceable that he did. It was more of a thriller film. It was a fantastic score, and it did not have a whole lot of digital elements in there. It was more an orchestrated score, but he had a great theme for the film, and the movie wasn't bad, but the score was great in my opinion. It was
fanboy being a fan.
Well,
kidding,
something
kidding,
like that.
Kidding.
Now, there were so many great moments listening to the score. The only track that I could think of that really kind of stood out as different, because there was a lot of moments. The score starts to, they have the same moment, same motif, same pace and everything else, and they just keep going till toward the end. And it's this one moment in the score where it sounds almost like a monster movie almost, or like a big natural disaster movie, which is what the film was not really supposed to be. And it kind of took me out for a moment, just for a brief moment. It was the end of the film with the big giant floods happening and everything else. And I don't know. Back in the day when I listened to it as a kid, I loved it. But now going back and listening to it, I was like, it don't really fit the rest of the score. I guess it was because of what's happening in the scene or whatnot, but I just remember it was like it's just like the score is going and going. All of a sudden, it just stops for this brief moment. You hear, "Wah, wah, wah."
Godzilla. No,
Yeah,
I'm kidding.
that's what that's kind of what it sounded like. And I'm not saying it was a bad thing in the score. It just kind of took me out for a moment. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot this is happening. It's the big flood.
That's it. It's The Shining. You were humming The Shining, weren't you?
No. That's a different. I'm not doing that for copyright reasons, but yeah.
That's what it sounded like. You were humming The Shining.
But and that was really the only part of the score that kind of took me out. The rest of it was, I stayed with it from beginning to end, and I was like, I wanted to hear more.
Well, like I said, I have watched this movie before, so the score has been my first introduction into the movie, and I liked it. Even with that little offsetting piece, it sounded fine to me.
And unfortunately, we were only listening to this on YouTube. Now, there is an expanded score out from La La Land Records, which I cannot wait to get my hands on. And it features a lot of different score pieces that were not in the film, ones that were, straight from the film as you heard it with the film, because there are a couple of tracks in the film that are different from the soundtrack that was released back in 1998. Now, when we watched the film and we sat down and did you have any expectations? Did you have any hype for it just from listening to the score, starting to watch the film?
No, I just knew that it was going to be an action movie because of the score. The score was action oriented. So I didn't know if it was going to be heist per se. I knew that there was going to be a lot of action listening to the score. I didn't know that it was a merger between a heist and a natural disaster. I just thought maybe that there was like a rain or, something going on. I didn't know until I started watching it. And the first thing that I noticed, which you mentioned prior, was that the movie immediately started with the theme. And it was very reminiscent to me of our episode 1 when we covered Jaws and what Williams' score did. It was immediate. As soon as the movie started, you heard the Jaws theme. This one here, it didn't even start the scene really good. You saw was it Paramount?
Yeah, it was a Paramount logo.
It was a Paramount logo, and as soon as the stars went around the logo, and then bam,
that was fantastic. I had to actually rewind it because the stars, right when they touch the mountain, that's when the score kicks in. I was like, that's brilliant. It was beautiful,
and that's when I knew it was going to be a good pairing. No.
And it was great. It was a fantastic touch what he did. And the one thing he did when the score started up and you heard the theme really kick in, and I'm a geek or nerd, however you want to put it, but I like to hear the theme hit right when the main title happens. So right when it said you got like Christian Slater, Morgan Freeman, Randy Quaid's name popping up there, and then when it said Hard Rain, that's when the main theme kicked in. I loved it. I love when movies do that. When the main title card kicks, I want to hear that main theme. I don't want to hear something else, hear the theme kick in, before then. I want to hear that theme kick in right when that title card hit. And that's what happened with this. So I was like, yeah, this works.
And that's what delivered. But no, what stuck out with me was the score came out instantly. And then the way the movie started to me was kind of reminiscent of Beetlejuice. And you know how Beetlejuice started with like a panoramic view of the town, and then they kind of get smaller.
I call it the helicopter shot.
Yeah, I have no idea. I don't know the terminology.
I don't either. That's what I'm saying. I call it the helicopter shot.
But it was reminiscent of that. And then, they kind of zoomed into the town, and then you hear the bluesy riff come in. And
right when you see the town.
Yeah, when you see the town, and it matched really nicely. And I was well pleased. Now, about the rest of the movie. I felt like they should have either concentrated on the heist aspect or concentrated on a flood, and not both. So the movie itself, to me, was not the greatest thought out in the world. I know that, from my research after I watched the movie, the extensive time that they put in for making the sets, for example, and filming and the special effects, which were practical, of course. But I know that a lot of money was spent doing that. But I felt like it was just too much. But the score itself, when the score was put in the movie, we just discussed that the score seemed action-y throughout the whole listening experience. Well, the movie was action-y throughout the whole watching experience.
Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of character build-up, storyline, and everything else.
Character development, no.
Yeah. No, it was just
heist
action throughout the entire thing.
And rain.
Right. A lot of flooding, a lot of rain, a lot of action. That was it.
So I felt like the score helped the movie, in my opinion. And so I liked how they placed the score. I don't have any argument with how they put the score in the movie.
Now, although Christopher Young was known mainly for horror films and thriller films at that time, there were a couple of moments in there where you could hear kind of thriller/horror-esque kind of coming through. Particularly one piece I can think of right off the top of my head is when you see Jim and his crew first show up, when the light beams across the flood, when Ed Asner and Christian Slater are stuck in the flood, and it kind of had a slight horror feel to it, just for a brief moment, and then like with the dead cow, there's a big horror.
Oh yeah, that was that. What do you call it? A jump scare?
Yeah,
kind of a jump scare
kind of
there.
Stinger there for a little bit.
That's it, a stinger.
The
That's what I'm looking
rising
for.
strings and everything else, but other than that, there really were no moments in there where you thought of horror.
No, and like I just mentioned, it seemed all actiony, and so you've got this Minnie Driver, her character, and Christian Slater's character. These kind of seem like they wanted to take it in a romantic direction, or that they were attracted to each other, but the character development in the movie seemed flat, so it just seemed awkward. There's something that I guess should have been there, but you didn't feel it while watching it. But the music didn't reflect it either.
Well, it didn't really reflect it either, mainly because there was really nothing there to reflect it from. I mean, because I never felt anything for those characters at all, watching the film. And
that's because you're a guy.
Yeah, probably.
You and your action.
Well, there's times when you can have action and you can kind of break it up a little bit.
Well, look at, and I made this example. Look at Ocean's 11. You have character development in that movie. You have a heist movie. You have George Clooney's character and his, I don't know if they were divorced or was it soon-to-be divorced wife, and their storyline. But this movie here, there was none of that. It was just really one-dimensional.
All right, let's go for another one. Let's go Broken Arrow. When you got Christian Slater and Samantha Mathis, she's the park ranger and everything else. That was one of those films where it was action, 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 but there was a lot better character development between those two characters, and there was a better chemistry.
And I could have imagined that in this movie. That the chemistry could have been there if it would have been done a little bit better.
Maybe it was just a choice of casting.
Perhaps. Minnie Driver, they did an interview with her in 97 with Empire Magazine, and she said that she hated working on the film because of the tense and continuous wet conditions.
I can see that because it was constantly raining throughout the entire movie.
And that could have affected some of the acting in the movie. Been.
I know Morgan Freeman was not happy with this movie.
So
there was a thing he said. He's like, "Have you seen this movie? Don't. Just don't." And the movie's not the greatest in the world.
But the score, I think, elevated it higher than what it would have been elevated.
That is the one thing you always hear in the reviews. The score is the one thing that is really driving the movie and helping it.
Yes.
So, I mean, and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to pick the score, not just because I'm such a big fan of it, but also because the film is not the greatest in the world, but the score is one of the things that really elevates the film.
So you talked to Christopher Young before we started this episode.
I did.
So what did he have to say about his score?
I asked him, was there anything about any insight or notes about the film he would like to share? It's such a very, very wonderful person too, by the way. He said one of the few times he visited the town, it was on hydraulics and they could raise and lower it whenever they needed it. That's
neat.
That is really neat. He said no complaints on the project. It was a pure joy to work on it. And you can tell that.
Yeah.
You can tell that listening
Absolutely.
to the score. I thought that was just wonderful when I read that. So I was really excited to go back and listen to it. And you can tell he had fun with it.
So how did you feel now that you're older going back and actually watching the film? Because you hadn't seen it in a while.
Going back and watching it after listening to the score again, it was I had a hype for it. I was like, I can't wait to watch this movie again because it's been so long since I've seen it. And after listening to that score again, I was like, yes. Back in the day, I had a fondness for the film because I liked the score so much. So whenever I couldn't listen to the score, I would watch the film and I would get to hear that score again. But going back and watching it now, the film really is lacking. They were trying to do two different things at one time. And also, I'm fixing to spoil the movie for everybody. So if you don't want to hear this, please, just skip ahead or something. But in the film, Morgan Freeman and his gang are supposed to be the bad guys. Well, then it's revealed like part of the way through, Randy Quaid, who is the town sheriff, decides he's going to take the money and he's going to kill everybody else because they are witnesses. So they had this twist, and even Graham Yost himself said on the commentary for Speed that maybe that's something they shouldn't have done because it just didn't really work. And it doesn't. It does not work because you got Randy Quaid's character. When you first meet him, he's very kind and, warm and embracing-ish. And then Morgan Freeman's character is supposed to be the bad guy, but you never really see him as the bad guy.
Well, it was kind of off-putting for me watching Morgan Freeman, not just as the bad guy, but his acting. Because Morgan Freeman, in my mind, kind of pairs himself with intellectual characters or characters that have a pretty good character development. So when you see Morgan Freeman in this movie and he's supposed to be acting bad, even the way he's acting is not bad to me. It's more intellectual, because he's the leader of this gang,
right.
And he really don't shoot anybody, but he's supposed to be a bad guy.
Now, in the storyline, it's supposed to be that Ed Asner, who is Christian Slater's uncle in the film, set this whole thing up. He's been thinking about it for years and decided to take the money, and it was going to be Morgan Freeman's character who was going to heist him on the interstate, but the flood stopped them and everything else. And then a character by the name of Kenny did not know that Charlie, which is Ed Asner, was in on the heist and accidentally shot him, which starts this whole thing off. I guess by that logic, he wasn't really supposed to be the technical bad guy, but he's the thief. In the end, he even says it himself. He's just in it for the money. And so he's not technically the bad guy. I guess that's where Randy Quaid's character comes in. So that's one thing that kind of hurts the film. You don't have a really definite bad guy until, the sheriff decides he's going to kill everybody and take the money. The
other thing I was reading, and Morgan Freeman said that they did a screening of the movie, and the audience, they asked the audience what do they feel like they need to do, because in the original filming, Morgan Freeman's character was killed and died. And there was unanimous comments that, no, don't kill him, we love Morgan Freeman, sort of thing. I'm paraphrasing. They probably didn't say love, but, they said don't kill him, and he needs at least some of the money. So after they screened the film, Morgan Freeman reshot those scenes in which they didn't kill him, and he took a bag of money, and he left.
And he's like, I'm the thief, and I end up taking money, and I survive.
That's right.
He said, makes no sense.
So, yeah, it's kind of paradoxical. It made no sense.
So, as always, whenever we do this, we judge it by three different criteria. Does it work for the film?
Yes, absolutely. In my opinion, it
Not
works.
only does it work for the film, it helps the film. The score is the one thing that really holds this film together. Because if it was
Correct.
not for the score, this film would, really, really falter. And he did such a great job with that. And I've had to do that myself, try to help a film out with the score, try to elevate it a little bit more. And that's what he did. Because if there was any other score for this film, if there was a bad score, for this film, it would have really, really hurt this film even more to the realm
But
of
there's a
obscurity.
balance. So if it would have been a bad score, then it would have hurt the film. Or if it was too over the top, it would have hurt the film because the film was just not that good. So I think that Christopher Young met that balance really well. He balanced it nicely. So when they put it into film, I agree, it elevated the quality of the film.
Now, what was your favorite scene or favorite score piece?
So my favorite score piece goes with just this theme that I thought was so I wouldn't want to say the word stupid, but it made no sense to me. And it was when they did the jet ski through the school. And it's where they brought the theme back and
Right.
reworked it. I liked that. I like how he did that. But the premise of the jet skis going through the school hallways just to me was no. I didn't like it.
See, I didn't have too big of a problem with
Yeah,
that.
no, I had a big problem with that.
Going back and watching it, it was kind of cheesy.
Yeah.
It
Majorly.
It was cheesy. Now, my favorite scene and score piece was when where things take a turn and Morgan Freeman's character kind of becomes, starts working with Christian Slater. And he's like, just grab the boat, and Christian Slater grabs the side of the boat, and the theme comes in, but it's kind of higher pitch. It's a little bit, it's more heroic sounding, and that theme comes back. I thought I loved it because it was kind of a change of pace from the rest of the score that was happening before it. Of course, that's not one of my favorite scenes. One of my favorite scenes is where Richard Dysart's character says to Betty White, that because her character in the film, she's constantly bickering, nagging.
She's a nag.
And there's one part Christian Slater looks at him and he's like, "You want to come with me?" And then, Richard Dysart kind of thinks about it. But my favorite,
I love that.
My favorite scene is when they're rowing off. Richard Dysart's rowing the boat, and Betty White's just standing like, "Hurry, Henry, hurry, faster, Henry!" And he stops and he goes, "I'm going to row back there and see if he'll shoot you or me. Either way, he's fine." And she's like, "Henry." And of course, and that's when, I'm not going to say the full word, but she's like, "Do you want me to get us out of here?" And she's like, "Yes, of course." And then shut the F up. I laughed so hard when that happened. Even back then. And I had to pause it when we were watching it again because that whole part right there is hilarious, and it's much needed because every character in the film could not stand Betty White. They were always so irritated with her. So when you finally get that payoff, it was wonderful. I loved it.
I know, I do too, and I was going to mention that. I'm glad you did. That is like my favorite part of the whole movie because the rest of the movie to me just was lacking. And then you had the jewel Betty White, the jewel that she is, come in, and it starts off with her putting booby traps throughout her shop because she didn't want anybody to loot it. And then after she puts the booby traps in her shop, one of the either Minnie Driver or Christian Slater escaping from the bad guys,
right.
Stumble into the shop and trip one of the bear traps that she had. And then it was so witty and so nice and so refreshing. It was, to me, the best part of the movie.
Now, this is before Lake Placid where, Betty White opened up that she has a very foul mouth.
Well, she was a blue comic at one time.
Right. And see, I didn't know that until Lake Placid. So to hear, when you finally see Betty White again, because, she hadn't been in a whole lot of stuff until Hard Rain. And then that happens.
I just love Betty White.
It was one. Everybody does. So as far as favorite score to me, that was, it was, I think the track is called Jim Saves the Day. And it was wonderful. It was a nice change. I loved it. Now, what could have been done different? As far as what could have been done different with the score itself, I really don't think anything.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think anything could have been done differently with the score. Now, as far as the movie is concerned, I think they should have just focused on either the dangerous rains and the flood, or just focused on the heist when they created the movie. I think it would have been a better film. But as far as the score is concerned, I think he hit it out of the ballpark with what he had to work with.
Right. And as far as you're talking about, a nice balance of the natural disaster heist, maybe it's just they couldn't find a good balance. I mean, because it's a pretty good premise. Don't get me wrong. There's a flood happening, and there's they rob a armored truck, but the way they did it, it just there was not a good balance in there.
A few questions, Chris.
What?
Number one, why would they have waited so long to move the money? Number two, the Federal Reserve would have replenished the money lost in the flood. Wouldn't it have?
I didn't know.
Yeah, so, I found some kind of holes in the plot, but I think still...
Speaking of holes in the plot, I didn't mean to cut you off, but there was one thing that we both even talked about while we were watching it. All right, so the scene where Betty White and Christian Slater and Minnie Driver, they're all at their house, and then Christian Slater's like, I got to get back to the truck because the National Guard's going to be there. And as he's driving off on the boat, you see Morgan Freeman and his crew sitting there watching him go by, and then they decide to go back to the house to get to see where he came from. Christian Slater's there at the truck. He's getting this few stuff out and everything else. He gets a shotgun out, and that's when the dead cow shows up. And as he puts the shotgun on top of the truck, Morgan Freeman's there. There's no way he could have went back, got the old couple, got them, left their house and everything else, and then beat Christian Slater to the truck.
He wasn't in a speedboat.
Exactly.
He was in a normal boat.
That was one moment I'm sitting there going, okay, yeah, this movie is not that great.
I think that they just needed to focus on just the heist.
Yeah.
I like heist movies. Don't get me wrong.
I mean, you could have had a heist in just a storm or something, not a flood.
Well, yeah, a storm, like a rainy day, to me, it would be like them having the heist during a volcanic eruption, sort of thing.
That would be really dumb. Oh, Lord. But no, so does it work for the film? Yes, absolutely. In fact, this is a one moment of us doing this podcast where the score actually helps the film more than just working for it. And we talked about our favorite scenes and scores. And, as far as the score for the film, not really much could have been done different. I mean, because it was a very well orchestrated score.
For what he had to work with.
Yeah. So, yeah. So I was really excited about this, and coming back to it again after all these years, it was great. I loved listening to the score again, and I cannot wait to get the expanded soundtrack from La La Land Records. So as always, everybody, thank you all so much for listening. Now you can find us on social media. You have Facebook. Just type in @measuring_the_score. You can find us on Instagram. I think it's measuring_the_score. Twitter, we're @measurethescore. Send us an email, measuringthescore@gmail.com. We love hearing from everybody. We are actually getting a lot of interactions. You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple, Podbean, iHeartRadio,
YouTube.
So yeah, and if you listen to us on Apple, give us a rating, leave a comment. Let us know what you think, or just send an email. We're constantly checking our social media, so just get with us. We'd love to hear from you. So as always, thank you so much for listening for Measuring the Score. I'm Chris Lott.
And I'm Leslie Lott.
Have a good one. Hey everyone, before we completely close this episode out, I want to give a quick shout out to two different podcasts. First up, Quite the Interview. Talk with Jack, who runs Quite the Thing Media, about just different things and aspects of the indie podcast community. He's going through talking with different podcasters about their process. He gives them 8 different questions. Had such a blast talking with him. Also, Walt and Alan from the Wilder Ride podcast. Now, with that podcast, mainly did talk about my music career, but we also did talk about podcasting and just overall had a lot of fun. So make sure you check out Quite the Interview and the Wilder Ride podcast. As always, for Measuring the Score, I'm Chris. Have a good one.